Welcome back. We are about to start our first coding project. Are you ready to create your own first tool for hacking? We're going to create our tool using Python 3. And since Python is out of scope for this course, I won't be explaining Python basics. However, I will give my best to explain what we are exactly doing inside of our code for anyone that hasn't programmed before. Now, I know what you're thinking. Programming is not needed for hacking. That is true. However, learning programming will help you understand how different tools work in greater details, and it will also allow you to create and weaponize your own tools that you can use. My advice for anyone that is learning ethical hacking and penetration testing is to, at some point of your journey, learn a programming language. Since if you're only using tools that other people create, you're limited to their tools. Now, these programming projects you can watch as we go through the course, or you can skip it until you finish entire course and then get back to them. It is completely up to you. Nonetheless, let's get straight into creating our first tool. Here we are in our 𝐶𝐂 So how are we going to approach this? Well, for some of you that already have programming experience and already know Python, feel free to code this program wherever you want. You can code it on your host machine, you can code it in your 𝐶𝐂 machine, whatever you feel the best. You can also use any editor you want. But for you that haven't programmed before and have no idea what I'm talking about, what we're going to do is we're going to open our terminal. And inside of our desktop directory, we're going to create a directory called tools. Now you will notice we got it right here on the screen. And if I change the directory to that directory, right here we will create our program. And we're going to put our code inside of a Nano editor. Now we are already familiar as to how we can use Nano. So to open a file, we want to type Nano and then the file name. In our case, we are creating a Python program, so it needs to have extension .py. And since we just finished our scanning section, we will be creating a port scanner. It will not be an advanced port scanner like Nmap, but we're going to see how we can create a simple one just so you better understand how scanning of ports work. So let's type nano and then portscanner.py, and this will automatically open up our file. Here we're going to type in our code. The reason why we are not using anything else to type in our code is because Nano editor is really simple and easy to use. First thing that we're going to do is we're going to import the libraries that we're going to need for this project. The first library is called socket library, and we import them like this. This import command just loads this library. And we need this library to be able to communicate with other machines using TCP and UDP protocols. And another library that we're going to use is called term color library. And we're only going to need this library in order to print some statements in different colors. So nothing else besides that. Let us create the base of our program. So the first thing we need to do, whenever we are creating some type of a connection over TCP or UDP, we need to initiate a socket object. And socket objects are also called socket descriptors, and they are used for internet communication. To initiate a socket object in Python, we can call that object sock, for example. And to initiate it, we type equals and then socket.socket. So what we're basically doing right here is we're calling this library and calling the socket function from that library. This will initiate the socket object for us and it will be stored right here. And all we're left to do, since Python is an easy programming language, is we need to connect to our target and our port. And for that, we're going to use our socket object and the connect function onto our socket object. This connect function requires two different parameters that we specify between two open and two closed brackets. And those parameters are IP address and also port. But these are something that we have not defined yet. Our program does not know what an IP address is or what the port is. So what I'm going to do is I will create a function right here, And to initiate a function, I just type def and then the function name. This function name will be called scanPort, and it will take two parameters, which will be these two parameters. So let's copy them and let's paste them right here. These are going to be the two parameters that our function will take. And these two lines of code will belong to our function. In order to make them belong, you just tab once both of these lines, and they will belong to this scanPort function. Now that we try to connect, there is logically one thing that we need to do. This connect function will either succeed, so we will manage to connect to a port, or it will not succeed. We won't be able to connect to that port. So these are two different options. Once we manage to connect, that means that the port is open, and if we don't manage to connect, that means that the port is closed. And what we are going to do to figure out whether a certain port is closed or opened, we're going to use try and except statement. And to specify try and except statement, we can do something like this. In the first line of our function, we type try, and then we tab these two lines to belong to the try statement. And down here, we also add except. Make sure to add two dots at the end. And what this simply means is that inside of our function, it will try to initiate the socket object, and then it will try to connect onto a certain port, on a certain IP address that we will specify later. If it manages to do that, then we can print something like print port opened. We can specify something like this. If it doesn't manage to connect, then it will proceed to this except statement, and then we can print port closed. Alright? So simple as that. Now there are a few things that are wrong with this function. First of all, we are just printing port opened. So once we try to connect to a port, we will not know which port is open, which port is closed, since we didn't specify a number. To specify exactly which port is open, what I'm going to do is type port opened, and then plus, and then I can specify string of port. And remember, port is our parameter for our function. And what this string function does is it converts the port, which is an integer number most likely, to be a string. So it can print it out using this print statement. What I'm going to do also is add space right here so we print this more nicely. And right here I will add the plus sign, which means that we successfully discovered an open port. And down here, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to print minus sign, which means port is closed. And then we're going to add plus the string of port. Another thing we will do in case we find out an open port is we can close the socket object. Since we successfully completed an action, we found an open port, we can close the socket object. Okay, so this is our base function. For now on, we're going to leave it like this. But there are a few more things that we need to specify. First of all, we want to prompt to the user of this program what IP address or what target they want to scan. So outside of this function, we can create a variable called target or targets, whatever you like. And that variable will be equal to input. And this input function allows the user of the program, once they run the program, to input any string that they want. And here we will specify to them that we need a target. So enter target to scan. Once they enter a target, we can also ask them for port to scan. Now trust me, I know what you're thinking right here. This is too simple. We're only scanning one port on a target. So we don't really want to do that. We want to specify right here ports. So this will be enter how many ports you want to scan. So they can scan 100 ports or 1,000 ports or all 65,000 ports if they like. But how are we going to change that inside of our code? Well, we're not going to touch this at all. What we're going to do is we'll create another function called scan, But this just starts the same. This one doesn't have the port inside of the name. And this scan function will take 2 arguments as well. And those arguments are going to be the targets and the ports. And all we are going to do right here is we're going to iterate. So for port in range from 1 to ports, for each and every port, we're going to call scan port function. And this scan port function, remember, takes 2 arguments. And those 2 arguments are going to be targets and port. And let me explain this a little bit better. What these 2 lines do is this will iterate from 1 to any number that they specified right here inside of this line. And then it will call for each and every number the scan port function. So it will start from 1 and then it will scan port number 1 using this function. Then it will increase port to be 2 and then it will call scan port function once again once the port is equal to 2. And it will do that until it reaches the port's number that the user of the program specified right here. But what if our user wants to specify multiple targets? What then? They, for example, don't want to scan only 1 target, they want to scan 2 targets. That's why what we're going to do is we're going to change this scan function, and this scan function will take target as an input and it will scan the port on target. But notice this target is something that we don't really have. If we call right here scan target and then ports, we have targets, but we do not have target. And we're going to change this targets variable to be enter targets to scan. And inside of the brackets, we will explain to them, split them by comma. So they can specify, for example, 2 targets. They can specify them like this. They want to scan 192.168.1.1, comma 192.168.1.5. For example, if they specify it like this, then we have a problem. We will call the scan function on 1 target, but we need to split this input so it scans this IP address and then after it, it scans this IP address. Let's see how we can do that. For now, down here, what we're going to do is we're going to check if there is comma inside of our targets variable. If, and to specify that, we open single quote, type comma and close single quote. If comma is in targets, this means that they specified multiple targets. So what we're going to do is we're going to go down a little bit and then print and then open double quotes. We can specify this star sign just so it looks a little bit better. Scanning multiple targets. And let's close the double quotes. And then right here what we can do is instead of calling the scan function outside of the if statement, we're going to call it inside of the if statement. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a for loop inside of this if statement. So for IP address, and we're going to call it IP_ADDR in targets dot split, and this split function simply splits the input that the user specified by any sign that we specify in between these single quotes. Now, since the users of this program will specify targets with comma, we also want to split the input with comma. That way, we're going to get with 2 IP addresses that don't have this comma in between them. And for each IP address in this targets variable, we're going to scan IP address and let us strip it out of any empty spaces. And we do that by typing strip, open the brackets, single quote, space, single quote. And the second parameter we will leave to be ports. In any other case, in case they specified only 1 target, we're going to use else statement. And in that case, we're simply just going to scan targets and then ports. So we're just pasting the entire input of this variable inside of the scan function. And that is because they only inputted 1 IP address, because there is no comma inside of this variable. So let's go through this real fast, just to figure out everything a little bit better. Let's go from the beginning of the program, which is down here. So we ask the user for the targets They can specify either one target to scan or multiple targets to scan separated by comma. Then they specify the ports that they want to scan, and by specifying ports I mean the amount of ports that they want to scan. So if they type 500 right here, our program will scan first 500 ports. Once we take these two variables and we take the input from the user, we check whether comma is inside of this targets variable. If it is, that means multiple targets have been specified. Then we go for each IP address inside of this targets variable and we check out those IP addresses by splitting the input with comma. Then we will scan each and every IP address with the specified amount of ports. In case they only specified one IP address, then we scan that one IP address with the specified amount of ports. Once we go to the scan function, this will go for port in range 1 to the amount of ports specified, and it will perform the scan port function for each and every port. If we manage to connect, we will print port is opened. If we don't manage to connect, we will print port is closed. Let's see whether this works. If I Ctrl O, then enter and Ctrl X to exit. To run this program, I can use Python 3 and then PortScanner.py. It asks us enter targets to scan, split them by comma, and what I'm going to do, I'm going to scan my router. What you can do, you can open and start your Metasploitable, and I'm going to start it right now as well, just so we can test later the multiple target scan. And I'm going to type the IP address of my router, which is this one. Press enter, enter how many ports you want to scan. Let's say I want to scan first 100 ports. And we get our first error. Now, don't worry, errors occur a lot in programming. Let's see what the error says. String object cannot be interpreted as integer, and it is inside of this line. Let's check it out. Let's go back to our program using nano, so nano PortScanner.py, and let's see where the error is. It seems to be right here. So we are pasting this ports option as an integer, but we are taking an input as a string. So what we can do is we can wrap this ports input inside of the integer function, which will convert this number into an integer. Let's try and see whether this fixed the problem. If I type it once again, 192.168.1.1, and then ports 100. Wow, this finished really fast. And we can see it scanned 100 ports. It managed to find these two that are open, and this one as well. Let me just find it. And this one as well. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is a terrible output. We can barely see which ones are open and which ones are closed. So what we can do to fix this, we can go back to our program, and in the except part where we print that the port is closed, we are not going to print anything. We're just going to pass. This pass simply means do nothing and continue with the execution of the program. Why we do this? Well, we don't really care which ports are closed. We only want to print the ports that are open. So let's see whether this fixed our program. If I type Python 3 PortScanner and I run the same IP address, which is my router, first 100 ports, there it is. We get a whole lot better output. We only get ports that are open. Let's test this program on two different targets. So I started my Metasploitable, and what I'm going to do is log in, check the IP address of a Metasploitable, which is 192.168.1.5, and if I run the program once again and type 192.168.1.1, which is my router, and then comma 192.168.1.5, press enter, enter amount of ports, let's say we want to scan 100 ports, and this will work, but it gives us the wrong output. We don't know which ports belong to which target. So let's go back to our program and see how we can fix this. To fix this, we're going to add a print statement inside of our scan function. Right at the beginning, we're going to print. First, we're going to start with a new line character, and the new line character is \n. Close the single quote, plus, and let's open single quote once again, enter space, and then type starting scan for, another space, and then single quote, plus the string of the target. And remember, target is our argument to our function, and this target is an actual IP address that we split right here. Here we paste this IP address inside of the scan function, and this IP_addr.strip is the same thing as this target right here. So if I print it like this and close two brackets because we have one bracket opened right here, let's test it out once again. Control-O to save, Control-X to exit, and let me run the program once again. First 100 ports. This is a lot better. We get which ports are open for my router, and we also get which ports are open for my Metasploitable. Now, with this, our program is basically finished. What you can do to make this better is you can change the output a little bit. So right here where you print scanning multiple targets, we can use the term color library that we imported, and from that term color library we can take the colored function. And this function just changes the color of our print statement into any color that we want. So what we need to do is inside of the print statement type term color.colored, open bracket, type the statement that you want to print, close one bracket, type comma, and then open single quote, and let's say we want to print this in green. And then I need to close two more brackets, one for the colored function and one for the print function. Let's see whether this will work. Control-O to save once again, and Control-X to exit. Python 3, PortScanner.py. Unmatched bracket. So let's check it out. Yeah, we do got one bracket more. Let us go back and remove it. So we got print bracket closed right here, and we got the colored bracket closed right here. So yeah, this one right here is 1 too extra. Let's delete it. Save it once again. Run the program. Type any two targets that you want to scan. In my case, I am using router and Metasploitable. And I want to scan, let's say this time I want to scan first 200 ports. Now it doesn't seem to print it in green for some reason. Let's see what the problem is. If I go all the way down to our print statement, right here it seems that our colored function only took this as an argument. And we want it to take this as well. So what we need to do, we first of all need to delete this. What we need to do is open another bracket right here and close another bracket right here. Now this does seem confusing with all of these brackets being open and closed, but what we just did is we extracted this statement to be one function. So inside of the colored, we open one bracket for the function itself. Then we paste two arguments and we split these arguments like this. And first argument is this print statement, while the second argument is the color that we want to print it in. Hopefully right now this will work. And if I go and run the program once again and scan first 200 ports, now it seems to work. It says scanning multiple targets and it is printed in green. As we can see for our Metasploitable, we also found two more additional ports because we increased the number to 200. Cool. Now you got your first tool ready to use in your penetration tests. Now, even though this is a simple port scanner, you can do many things to make it a little bit better. If you are an experienced programmer, what you can do, you can try to receive a banner from these open ports. So you can try to send packets and receive packets and store the response inside a variable and then print it out to see what banner does an open port have. And banner is just something that an open port might send as an information as to which software it is running on that open port. And from that banner, we can also extract the version of that software. But we're not going to be doing that right now because that would be a little bit too advanced for us. Right now we are happy with this program. In the next few videos, we're going to be covering vulnerability analysis. See you there.